Hi folks, I'm live with life coach Carol Linden, 25 years experience in Jungian typology. She knows what she's doing and she knows what she's thinking when it comes to typology. And we were having a fantastic discussion about, we just got into like some differences between ENFP and ENTP. And what I think I've noticed in the difference when you interact with them is that ENFPs will sort of comment on how the conversation is going and they sort of like adapt better, whereas maybe the ENTP is more about, look at these ideas I can get out. And something I've seen that more with the male ENTPs, and also Carol was mentioning the tertiary FE. I think that with the ENTPs, resemblance. I always say, I'm going to put the resemblance in there. That their use of FE in terms of facial expressiveness, it's like it's either on or it's off, and they can sort of like seem like they zone out. Whereas with like ENFPs, it seems to be on all the while.
When we lose their interest, absolutely. When they're no longer interested in what's being said, they probably do. Would you be interested in what type specialist Paul Teager had to say about ENTPs?
Of course, Carol.
Paul Teager is the author of one of the best-selling type in career books. He also did a book on type in raising kids and type in relationships. So Paul's been around for decades doing great work. And for 10 years, one of the ways one of his avenues of revenue was as a jury consultant for defense attorneys. And he said what would happen is someone with ENTP preferences would get up on the stand and the defense attorney would question them and they'd be walking back to table looking at Paul and mouthing words, "This is my guy, this is my guy." And Paul is thinking, "Oh, this is so not your guy." He said, ENTPs are the nuclear weapon on a jury. Do not let them get on your jury. He said in the first place, they use that extroverted feeling charm to charm you when they want to, when they're in the jury box, when they're in the box. But when they get in the jury box and then they get in the jury deliberation room, they go into introverted thinking to make decisions. And that's not people considerate. That's very analytical and very slicing and dicing. So he said, if you want somebody who you're going to try to talk into feeling compassion for your client, and he said, you got the wrong person. You've got a charming person who's going to make an analytical decision and who's so freaking charming, they can sway an entire jury. So he said, ENTPs are the nuclear bomb on your jury. Do not go there. And that's straight from the mouth of Paul Teager.
Well, you must be encountering more charming ENTPs than the ones that are on Facebook being Showy. You're probably encountering the ones who are more developed and can use that sense of humor. But I would think, though, another reason why you wouldn't want ENTP preferences on a jury is that they might be libertarian and go in for jury nullification. Judge Andrew P. Napolitano, who we libertarians love Judge Andrew Napolitano, and where he actually talks about jury nullification. If you want to get out of jury duty, just mention jury nullification. So that's where
I'm writing that down, Ben.
Yeah. It's where it's like, if it's all you got to say is, well, I think that law's unconstitutional anyway.
Oh yeah, that'll get you off of it.
That'll get you off. That'll get you off.
What is our topic today? Remind me.
Thank you, Carol. We are going to be talking about FI in the ENFP.
Okay.
And I was going to squeeze, and I forgot to squeeze it in. So this is an idea with the slides that we're going to do, folks. We're probably going to do about half of these because in the second half, it gets a little bit more tangential, a little bit more NA. But the first half is disciplined. And so what we're going to do is we're going to look at, and so because we're doing what is known as the auxiliary function in MBTI, what I thought is we'd actually have a discussion about the roots of this and how SOCIONICS and MBTI see the auxiliary function differently in terms of like when you're testing for it. And also we're going to look at the differences between internal behavior and external. Well, not internal behavior, but an internal process and an external behavior in terms of like the JP. So,
well, don't you think for any introverted judging function, there's one thing going on inside your head about it, and it may or may not bear resemblance to what you do out here in the there's a whole lot of extroverted feeling stuff happens inside me that never finds voice and gets mentioned in the outside world. Because remember, that's about me evaluating things, and
right.
You don't necessarily say those things out loud.
See, what I've got to do, Carol, is I've got to add another slide, but I know which one to add. It's
okay.
One that just shows the difference between INTJ and INTP. It's what it is. It's one of these funny heads, and oh, I pressed the wrong thing, but that's not a problem. It's not an emergency. I've got that. Right click, copy, paste, and then it will appear in this folder that because I'm sharing the images in a certain folder, and there we go. And there's a couple of things there later on. Ah, there it is. And this is the difference between. Right. Now,
I'm loving this, Ben. Oh, I love this.
Yeah, they're also. I just think that this so captures the difference between INTJ and INTP. So, Carol, I'll give you about 10 seconds to notice which is which, because it's so clear.
Well, on the right, we've got facts and goals, and I'm thinking that's all about extroverted thinking. And on the left, we've got open-minded and universal truth, and that just and plus, I love random knowledge about everything. Oh, that's got to be INTP.
Yes. Yeah, but so, folks, you've got to think: how are INTP's internal judges? That bit there. Procedures to organize everything they know. That's it.
Well, you know, that random knowledge about everything, I think that's connected with our extroverted intuiting, because
yes.
I lead with that function. It's your auxiliary, but I lead with it, like ENTPs and ENFPs do. Yeah. We lead with it. And I think that what looks well, I guess it is random. It looks random because it is. But we've got all these things, and we were interested in them, so we stored them. Not that they have anything useful, but there's all of this random geeky kind of knowledge I have that it was interesting. And I think I saved it in my head because I found it interesting, not because I had to use it for anything.
I think, I think that Dario said that Linda said to him, it's not random. It might not be important, but there's a connection.
That's right. There is a connection. Thank you for saving me with Linda's quote. That's wonderful. She's right. It's not random. It just looks like it to everybody else.
Right. So if we talk about this, so because this gets to the auxiliary function, these are my thoughts, Carol, on. I'll let you read that.
For some reason, I'm looking at extroverted sensing. Why am I looking at extroverted sensing?
Right. It should be, if you click on my square, it should say, it should be a little picture. It should look like that. Oh no, I made a mistake. I'm
seeing your biography and then a pink thing about extroverted sensing and number 7.
Yes, that's it.
Okay.
This is the post I made about why I think MBTI is right to do their questions based on external behavior.
Okay.
Where SOCIONICS is a little bit TI, and it says, no, they lead with an introverted judging function. They must be a J. And so it's like, this is explaining why it's difficult to create questions that get at that. So I'll let you read through this and comment on it.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll just say that LII is TINE. It stands for Logical Intuitive Introverts.
Okay. You know, I haven't done that much reading about Isabel developing the questions, except I know it took her decades. And I know once she got them done, one of Myers-Briggs has a couple different kinds of validity it uses, but the one it does not use is having two versions of the instrument and see if they both get the same results. And someone asked her if she was going to do that. And she looked at them and said, it took me 30 years to get the questions right. No, I'm not going to start over with the questions.
Yeah.
So this woman literally spent 3 decades getting those questions to a way that was predictable and gave good results.
Were her own preferences INFP?
Right.
Right. So she's going to have that strong TE. And also, this thing, people might just think, oh, you got that little bit of TE there at the bottom. But no. Once the person is on their territory, and I suppose her territory is doing this test, it can be like really strong. Just like Dario with his love of SE, Isabel probably had that love of extroverted thinking. It's like, I'm going to get this test right.
Okay, Ben, you're going to have to use the word instrument because Isabel turns over in her grave every time someone says test instead of instrument.
Yeah, but if all the 16 types are equally good, then all the results of the test, everyone's a winner.
Of the instrument, Ben, of the instrument.
Of the instrument.
And yes, we are all winners. You're right.
Right, so I can put this down a bit. So I put there about the point about INTJ. Technically, they lead with a judging function, and Dario will show with his brain research that they have a little bit more activity in FP2 than FP1.
No, wait. INTJ leads with introverted intuition, which is a perceiving function.
Yeah, but
their judging function is their auxiliary extroverted thinking. So I'm sorry, what were you saying about that?
Well, my thing is that. So I give the example of Haley, who it was like really NITX, INTJ, and like she scored 100% on the J questions. And all of these J questions have to do with external behavior. So how would you design questions where she would score as a perceiver when technically an INTJ is a perceiver, but you're going to ask the kind of questions that sort of like go around that powerful extroverted thinking?
Well, INTJs and INFJs, and for that matter, ISTJ and ISFJ, all lead with an introverted perceiving function, but they want closure. I mean, they want closure. If you point your judging function to the external world, then your tendency is to want things to be executed and to get closure, and that's what the J and the P are about. Now, I lead with I extrovert my perceiving function. They extrovert their judging function. So even though they start with that perceiving function, what they're extroverting, and so what they're pointing to the world is a function that wants closure. The extroverted functions want closure. So that's what makes sense there to me. So, say more if that doesn't make sense to you.
That does make sense to me, Cal, like when you're looking at someone and their external behavior. But I suppose if you see an INTJ when they're like zoning out and they're in like their NI mode, that's when they're doing their internal perceiving, because it's like them going into their own unconscious and things popping up. But it's like, and we can't see that. That's very hard unless you are an NI Dom. We cannot see that process of what it's like.
Yeah. And I'd like to ask Dario. Gosh, I'd love to have Dario here to ask this. I've developed introverted intuition, but a lot of times people do develop the opposite introvert extrovert of their dominant function. So I don't lead with it. I'm nothing like an INFJ in that regard, but I have developed it and I'm aware of it. But my sense of it is I have no control over it. It pops up and shows me something, or it doesn't. I can choose to sit down and use extroverted intuition and think about possibilities. But my relationship with introverted intuition is I'm not in control. It either comes or it doesn't. So my question is, INFJs and INTJs, do they feel as much at the mercy of it as I do, or are they more in control of it than other people? Because they lead with it, and I don't know the answer to that.
Now, Cal, should I change the control function to the no control function? because you said you don't have control over it, and Victor calls it the control function.
Well, I have no control over introverted
Right.
intuition. I'll tell you that. So I'm just curious if
Right.
people who lead with it feel they have more control over it.
Well, yeah, I would think so. I mean.
But I don't know. We'd have to. Well, wait a minute. No, you lead with introverted thinking. Never mind. We'd have to ask them because I don't know.
Yeah, unfortunately, I've not got Jonathan's phone number, and everybody else might not like it in the cinema. It says, "Hey, can you tell us about your lead?" NI?
That's right, because Jonathan's preferences, because he's public about it, we can say it, right?
Yeah.
INFJ, am I remembering that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm so sorry he's at the movie.
It's this thing, though. It's like once they are on their own and they're in their heads, and it's like with Dario. I mean, if you listen to Dario the way he talks about typology, it's like his natural preference isn't to use a theory that he sees, and because he's not done NLP and you've done NLP, like he might see a theory as restrictive, like a veil of Mayer. It's like scales before your eyes that gets in the way of the truth. And so if you have these rose-colored typological lenses where you look at people just through the type, and maybe you delete everything that doesn't fit. And so it's only that, and whereas the bits that don't fit the model, they might be really important pieces of somebody's character. And so you could almost call it the veil of types. And I could maybe say that in general, the INTP is like looking at the world through like this system of types. So internally, we'll look at the world through all these theoretical frameworks.
Right. That's classic introverted thinking. Is you're looking. Linda says you build models in your head, right, and you're looking at everything through that model or that framework. Whereas
INTJ, like Dario, it's like it's where the TI is used maybe critically. It's like they'll look at the INTP's theory and go, I think you got that bit wrong there. But it's like they're not looking at the world through a theory and judging it. So it's like how they perceive the world. It's like they have a feeling maybe of how it's going. And
a sense of knowingness. I think introverted intuition is described as just a sense of knowing what the truth is here. And that can make them unfairly seem arrogant at times because they just have a sense of knowing what needs to be done here or what's the truth. But that function, introverted intuition, is the least articulate function. If that makes sense, it's the hardest one to put language around. So it can be very hard for them to justify, and they'll have to stop and think and find it because they accept. Dario jokes that really he just accepts what comes floating up from the introverted intuition, and then he goes to his extroverted thinking function and tries to justify it. But he said, really, it comes up, and they have a sense of, I just know this is true. I just know it.
Maybe the INFJs are better at articulating it because they do it. I want to put this in the right way. They are of the NF pattern, and NS tends to be very good at articulating their feelings, and INTJs, resemblers as a whole, tend not to be. And also, it's not just that; it's they want to keep it quiet to themselves, and they also maybe some. I can give you a classic example of an INTJ who had led a double life. Isaac Newton, like you see his like photographs. And like he was an alchemist in his spare time, Isaac Newton. He did loads of crazy mystical stuff.
He was a man of his time, though, right? Yes. That's what was. And also, if you said INTJ, right?
Oh, I can give you a practical thing he did. This is fantastic. I can give you this brilliant thing. Now at the time they were minting coins, and people were shaving bits off the edges of these like silver coins. And so the mint, right, they contacted all the biggest brains in England and said, how can we solve this problem? And so what Newton came up with, the idea of like putting milling marks around the outside of coins.
Oh, yeah.
And even though it's worth less than the actual metal, and it's not even copper coins, haven't got copper in them, and they're flipping magnetic, they still have those milling marks around the outside. So like his practical thinking.
Oh, that's classic extroverted thinking to call it. But introverted intuition, I think, of all the, and I've known a lot of INTJ, people with INTJ preferences, and everyone I've ever gotten to know well had a seldom articulated but deeply mystical side.
Yeah.
And I think that goes with introverted intuition. I just do. So it makes total sense to me that leading with introverted intuition, yeah. And besides, and that was of his day too. If he were born today, he might not be messing with alchemy, but of his time, that probably looked like the way to go, you know?
Yeah. I think also that the NI DOMs might see their introverted intuition as something that it's like, oh, better not tell anybody about this. They might think I'm mad.
Well, that's true of a lot of mystical stuff. Yes, that makes it true.
So, Cal, so this, folks, is relevant. This is because we've been talking about JP, because the auxiliary function is super important in determining JP in introverts. Now, this theory, the INTPs love that box, TE+, and we'll be looking at this in like the final hangout when we go over the control function. But this might explain why INTPs can score as a J. So I'll let you look through that, Carol, in the TE+.
Now, wait a minute. Why? Explain to me what I'm looking at here. What?
This is for INTPs.
Okay.
And if you read through that, let me know if it rings true.
This is how they use extroverted thinking?
Yeah. Well, this is how they think about extroverted thinking. The problem is that they don't use it. If you read through, you'll see what I mean. They ignore it.
Okay.
So, for instance, Carl Jung, you know, when he talks about, when in his description of introverted thinking, he said in the background is running an accompaniment of extroverted thinking. And then he said for the extroverted thinking type, there is an accompaniment of introverted thinking in the background, because the extroverted thinking type, if they didn't have TI running in the background, they would just be like in awe of the data and not know what to do with it. And with the TI DOMs, it just fly off into the sky of theory. Now, having said that, Carl Jung's TI description was heavily focused on INTP. I mean, an ISTP looking at it, ISTP with Zembra looking at it, there's not much here for me. Yeah. Ish, a little bit.
It's actually, in Linda, I've heard Linda Barron say this many times. We do our best to tease things apart and describe an isolated function, but she said it is really very hard because the other function flavors it, if that's a word I can use here. And there's something I want to add about TI and TE. I heard an APTI presentation Monday, a webinar Bob McAlpin did. And Bob McAlpin has ISTJ preferences, and some people may know this, down through the years, he has orchestrated many events in which John Beebe, enabled to get John Beebe's work out into the world. And I attended several of those conferences. And Beebe's preferences, and Beebe's a famous Jungian, and Beebe's preferences are ENTP. So there we had an ISTJ doing extroverted thinking, doing all the logistics and figuring it out, so, to create a framework so that John's brilliant introverted thinking could do its great stuff. But Bob talked about how it was very clear that his extroverted thinking was doing a piece of the event, and then so that John's introverted thinking could show up and be brilliant with all his models and how it made sense. And then Bob said something very interesting. I don't know if you know, but he's retired military. He flew a helicopter in Vietnam.
Ooh.
And Bob, seriously, those I have a great deal of respect for Bob McAlpin, because that's the guys with the highest mortality rate. So Bob took a lot of guts in Vietnam. Anyway, so Bob was saying that being lifetime, retired military, he realized that introverted thinking is incredibly precise about the result you're going for. And introverted thinking has the patience to do the thinking and the describing and get really articulate and precise about what the goal is. He says, whereas the military is run by people like me who do extroverted thinking. And he said, what we don't do is spend long enough defining the outcome and all the specifics and particulars of it. We want to jump into extroverted thinking and we want to start executing. And he said, I think the military, we would have been better off if there was more introverted thinking in the room to carefully define that thing we're shooting for, instead of a room full of extroverted thinking who wants to jump in and do it. I thought that was a pretty cool thing for a lifetime military guy to, share with us.
Also, Carol, we've got like pattern, famous people saying like Kersey, promoter, most people, probably ESTP preferences.
Yeah,
and so it's like if everyone is thinking alike, someone isn't thinking.
That's
so
right.
It's like,
good for George.
So what I would say though, Carol, is, oh dear, I've got to do one of my digressions.
Wait a minute,
right.
we have to welcome somebody.
Yes, here we go, Bradley. Thanks
hey, Bradley.
for joining.
Hello.
So I've gone on to I'll do a slight digression for about 20 seconds. So the German generals were able to do a tactical invasion of France, which was like encircle the enemy, go towards Paris, go towards the capital. So tactical intelligence, the kind of intelligence that SPs are good at. At that point, the German army was all about, it had a thing called mission command, which is where the commanders in the field would adapt and do what they did. Now, the problem is when it came to the Eastern Front, Hitler, right at the start, said Hitler was evil, but he knew one thing that was right. We need oil. We're going to run out of oil in October. Seriously, because they had a massive oil shortage because the Royal Navy stopped oil getting into Germany. And they said, we need to invade the Soviet Union. We need to go into Ukraine to get the food, the grain, the agricultural stuff. And we need the oil in Astrakhan, Grozny, and Malakop. And but the generals, they were all, no, we've got to do the same thing that happened in France. We've got to go towards the capital and we've got to take Moscow. And it's like Napoleon took Moscow. The Russians just left. They took all the food with them, burnt the crops. Napoleon ran out of food and he had to march back.
Yeah, and lost almost everybody. Lost like 90% of his army.
So all the logistics, whereas so what happened was Hitler went along with the generals, but he said, okay, you can go towards the north and Leningrad, you can go towards Moscow, but I want the bulk of the forces to go towards the south. The guy at the time, Howder, he disobeyed Hitler, and he had the bulk of the forces going Army Group Center towards Moscow, and so enough didn't go towards the south. They didn't get the oil. And in the second year, in 1942, they tried to get the oil again, and then they were stopped, and they didn't get the oil. And that was one of the major reasons they lost the war. Couldn't get the oil.
You know, Ben, I never had heard the story of why they did the mad thing of starting the second front, because that's what did them in, was having two fronts. I did not know he was going after oil. Thank you.
Yeah, because they weren't getting enough oil from Romania, because there was only one oil field, Ploesti, and there's one in Hungary, and there wasn't enough. So anyway, logistics. So we talked about tea. We're going to get back on track. So, oh yes, you know that thing about ENTP, what you're saying there about John Beebe and ENTP? Well, a lot of ENTPs are Enneagram Type 7, so they're going to see like TE stuff as boring.
Right, exactly. Oh, I have a dear friend who's ENTP at the wazoo, and she's a salesperson, and she is incredibly charming. She goes into that extroverted feeling, and she's incredibly charming. I mean, she uses it for business purposes, but she's charming. And I described to her when I started learning the 8 functions, extroverted thinking. And I was reading a list, either Dario's or one of Beebe's list of extroverted thinking. And I was reading them off to her, and she rolled her eyes and she says, oh my God, it drives me nuts when they do that in those meetings. She said, you know what I do? I said, what? She says, I say something out of the wild blue sky just to get them off track because I'm so exhausted with their extroverted thinking. So she recognized that it not only was different from hers, but it bored her to tears and aggravated her, and she had to get back out of it.
That's good, Carol. Now, I'm going to direct your attention to this because we're both NP. This hangout is full of NPs. So this is the thing about the JP. So if you go through each 3 of these in TE, so it's like intellectually we know, we have a clear vision of the problem, we find it hard to take action. Is that worried his analysis is through practical application? And there's this number 3 here that might explain why INTPs in their heads are J's, and they can fool themselves. Like, for instance, even I do it, where I do the MBTI test and I score as a J because my intention is to be organized, and I will write the to-do lists, but I don't execute it. I mean, look at these whiteboards up there. They're absolutely full of stuff to do. So I'll click on that. There you go, the whiteboard up there.
Well,
right.
Ben, I warn people, don't look at people who are making a list and think, oh, definitely that's somebody who has a J preference. No, I have ENFP preferences, and I make a list to save myself.
Yeah.
The list saved me from my ENFP-ness and help me. They bring structure and order in. So it's not just the ISTJs who are doing those lists. It's people like me who need them to survive.
Right, so I'm going to go through number 3. So it's like with the JP thing, I think this really gets to the nub of the matter, and then also to the auxiliary function. So for instance, number 3, well-versed in business matters can suggest a variety of entrepreneurial initiatives. So that's like the internal TI, knows how to build an effective organization. Again, the internal TI, but typically, here we go. Here's where the weak TE comes in. Does not possess the energy and organizational skills necessary to put their knowledge to work. So externally, and David Kersey, yes, it is the ENFP if I hung out badly, but we're just talking about it because it's like the auxiliary function. David Kersey wrote the great thing about INTPs, where he says, if an organization is get the most out of an INTP, they must supply them with an efficient support staff in order to capture their ideas as they emerge before they move on to another one. So do you see the thing there, Carol, where INTP can have a lot of information for TE things and for practical thinking,
right? But
they don't enact it. They've not got the energy for it. And so in your case, that's with NI. You have all the NI stuff, but you don't enact it because that would mean suppressing your NE that wants options and to do different things, because NI means concentrating on one thing and following that strand. And so they're opposing. The NE and the NI oppose each other.
BB would say that there's a tension there, and the problem is you have to give up your dominant in order to spend time in the other one. And who wants to give up their hero function?
Right.
Because it's so fulfilling to be in. But Bradley's right, Ben. We're really not doing FI.
Right. It's weird because it's like the position in the model is because we're talking about the auxiliary position. Okay, people can see this on screen because we've got to catch up. So I'm going to do it like this. Right. Okay, this is all about extraversion and the top extroverted function. So I'll let you take that in quickly, Carol, if you've got any comments.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense to me.
Okay, and just this bit at the bottom, and then I'll move on. Yeah, the reason I'm going through this is because it's FI is the auxiliary function, and I thought I'd crowbar it in. Right, but it gets more relevant in the next slide.
Okay.
Right, so you're taking that in. People can take that in. We're now moving forward. So this is just a basic, but this is a bit jokey about JP. Right, so I'll move on to the next one. Right,
actually, Ben, can we go back to that? Yep. We have learned through the Myers-Briggs Step 2 instrument, what you're really describing there on the right would be called pressure prompted. And you put it off, and you don't get the energy to really do it till it gets close to time. And we used to teach that was what the P preference was about. And then they developed the Step 2 instrument and found out that 40% of people with a perceiving preference don't have that. They're actually early starters. So we quit teaching that pressure prompted is the equivalent of perceiving preference, because 60% of perceivers do have that preference, but 40% don't. So we quit teaching that as an attribute of having a P preference. But you've got a very good model there of, I may have to ask you to send me that because that's a great example of pressure prompted right there on the right.
Now, actually, Carol, I have Jeff Miller's results. This is how the MBTI Step 2 does JP. So
wait a minute, and we have Jeff Miller's permission to be showing this?
Yes, I've got them in the past.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
It's such an ESFP. Oh, it doesn't matter. It's cool. Right, so he's like, Matt, oh dear. Oh God, he's got a massive P preference.
Yeah, I call that off the charts.
Yes. Yeah, no, what I mean is, like, if he had a massive J preference, I was going to say Jeff has a huge Janus. But because it's the P, I can't say that.
Yeah, you can't. I made that mistake one time in a classroom. They didn't get it. You can't say that.
Yeah, I noticed that when you called it your EFP hyphenness, oh yeah, you're trying to avoid that.
That's right. Good catch, Bradley.
So this is just an example, folks. You can take that in, like, because we do have slides to get. So this is how the MBTI breaks down the JP.
And Ben, these are the step two. What we're looking at are the step 2 facets. And I love using the step 2 interpretive. What we're looking at is the step 2 interpretive report. And that instrument costs money, but the detailed information you get, and people can feel put in the box by just being shown 4 letters. But when we show them this report with scores on 5 facets on each of the preferences, which is 20 facets, all of a sudden the resistance just goes out of the room and people feel seen for the complex beings they are. They don't feel put in a box and defined. They feel honored and seen. Bradley, have you got a step 2 interpretive report? Have you gotten to be scored on the facets?
No, I actually haven't really done the proper MBTI test. I've just sort of self-typed based on descriptions of the functions.
Well, if you ever want to do the step 2 interpretive, you let me know, okay?
Oh, yeah, great. Thank you.
Yeah, the 20 facets, no joke, it's worth it for the 20 facets. It's really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's good, like, from what Jeff showed me. So I think there's a myth that Carl Jung didn't have the JP, but he certainly mentions rationality, irrationality here.
Well, doesn't he call the perceiving functions irrational and the judging functions rational? Am I getting that right?
Yeah. I mean, he even summarizes it as, so for instance, when it's got the SI and the NI DOMs, he'll say summary of the introverted irrational types. So he does use, it's like his 2 dichotomies are introversion, extraversion, and rationality, irrationality.
Yeah.
So
and he's using it in a highly technical way, okay? He's not saying these are irrational people. He's using this in a highly technical, specific way. So because people don't like to hear that they're irrational. I mean, so basically, it's exactly the same as perceiving and judging. But we're not here to talk. We've already talked about JP. This is about the fact that he's very vague on the auxiliary function. So, for example, so I'm going to say here, the auxiliary function, which is in every respect different from the nature of the main function. So that lends credence to those people who believe that, say, in ENFP, oh, that means the auxiliary function should be FI, because FI is introverted and it's a judging function, whereas your lead function is extroverted and it's a perceiving function. So that's different in every way. But when he then talks about the combinations, and when he says here, practical intellect, do you think that's fair to say that that's TE, Carol? Okay, hold on. From these combinations, well-known pictures are the practical intellect, for instance, paired with sensation. That sounds like SITE to me.
But is just the first one he describes as the dominant function, because he's talking about the auxiliary.
That's true. I'm here. That the first part is TE, and sensation is either talking about introverted sensing or extroverted sensing. When he's talking about extroverted thinking, he's talking about introverted sensation.
Yeah, so it's but that's the thing though, because it's like that's what you'd think if going by that previous line, but it's like he's very non-specific about the second function. So, for instance, sensation, speculative intellect breaking through. So this is about TI, especially in INTP, because where it says there with intuition, doesn't say extroverted intuition or introverted intuition. And then this next one, I said that this is more like INFJ. Jonathan corrected me and said, well, that could be ENFP as well. They could have artistic intuition.
Yeah.
It doesn't say a feeling judgment. It says feeling judgment. So it's like, do you remember how we did that second hangout, Carol, and we did this thing about the creative function, which Dario calls the sixth function. And so in Carl Jung, when I know you think Carl Jung was, his best fit type was INTJ, and Dario thinks it was INTP.
Oh, there's great discussion in the type.
Yeah.
I must admit, I do get INTJ from it instead of INTP,
Right.
but there's great, I mean, there are people, you know, way above my head in the field,
Right.
but there's some of them who think INTJ too, so I just don't argue about it. Can I tell you what leads me to INTJ?
Yeah, go on.
He was so spiritual.
Right.
In my experience, when you get to know an INTJ well, you find a deeply, for the most part, unspoken spiritual side. I don't get that. INTP seem more pragmatic to me and less spiritual, and INTJ seems, in my experience, to have a deep sense of spirituality. So I sense INTJ-ness from him, but I respect Dario a whole lot, and he thinks he's INTP. So it could be, and this is a third thing it said, Jung was such a highly developed person.
Yeah.
He was so different. I mean, look at
genius.
He spent his whole life doing this, and he was a genius. So he was so well differentiated. It may be pointless to argue about INTP or INTJ. Both may have been so well developed. It was hardly much different.
However, I would say about Carl Jung is that some of his functions are a lot better than others. So, for instance, his thinking functions and his intuitive functions are brilliantly described. FE and FI, not so much. Like somebody who looks at Enneagram and like all the nuances of motivation. When you look at extroverted feeling and introverted feeling, there's not a lot of depth there. And in Don Risso's book, Personality Types, he wrote it's not the most insightful of Jung's descriptions of the FE and the FI.
Well, when doesn't that just go show we all have blind spots? So he was describing extremely well the things he knew extremely well, and he wasn't being as detailed or specific about the ones he didn't know in his being, for example, the way he did intuition thinking.
So see that one in purple there? Mm-hmm. Before he described extroverted thinking as practical thinking. Now, when he describes the INTJ here, the philosophical intuition, and the reason why I know that he's talking about the INTJ is because before he's talked about Nietzsche as like the example of the INTJ, and I'll show you that in a moment. But he says here, the philosophical intuition, which in league with a vigorous intellect, doesn't say practical thinking. It says in league with a physical intellect, translates its vision into the sphere of comprehensible thought. Right, so I'll show you what he says about Nietzsche. So I'll just let you read this little bit here, Carol. And then I'll show you the next bit, and then I'll move forward.
Okay, go ahead.
Right, and then and Jonathan thought it was a fair description. He's read some Nietzsche, and that's him like having a crush on extroverted sensing, like another INTJ I've mentioned.
Now, Ben, we have not gotten to introverted feeling as the auxiliary function yet.
We will be, but we've been talking about the auxiliary function. It puts it in context. It's my INTP nature. So this is what I've been going into. It's like, what really is the auxiliary function? It's like, it depends what you look at. Model G would say it's what you use, but then there's a difference between what you use and what you value. ENFPs really value FI, but they also use a lot of extroverted feeling. And I'm just going to show you. I don't think he actually mentions 2, but but this is what Wikisocion says he wrote. I don't think he wrote it. He didn't say there was two. I mean, I've shown you it. I've shown you what he said. One person said he only wrote one line on the auxiliary function. I've measured it. That is nearly 3 meters long, that one line. So,
3 meters? You don't mean meters.
I do mean meters, because there, look, there's 32 lines and they're all 93 millimeters each. And so 2,976 millimeters.
Millimeters. You said meters, dear.
but 2,976 millimeters is nearly 3 meters.
Oh, okay.
Right. So now we're going to get to the nub of the matter. Now, this is from the Kersey profile, but I think this is his best profile because it brilliantly describes the conflict within the ENFP between the extroverted feeling and introverted feeling. So this is gold, in my opinion. So, Carol, I'll let you speak to that one here, that top sentence.
Well, actually, I can speak to this directly. Kersey's book was my introduction to this whole world. It's the first thing I read. I read it cover to cover. When I read his chapter on idealist and the part about ENFPs, I felt seen and understood, seen for who I was and understood for the first time in my entire life. So Kersey, I mean, reading this book set the course of my life and what became my profession. So that's how on target. I'm amazed. It means something to me that someone with INTP preferences looks at it and says, this is a great description because I felt so seen and understood by reading this. And having introverted feeling, if one of your values is how other people feel and your impact on them, then that sets up a constant battle inside you because you have to have internal coherence for introverted to live with your introverted feeling. But if it makes other people unhappy that you've chosen that, then that's a battle because one of your values is how they feel about it. So I get it that ENFPs can be set up for this battle between extroverted and introverted. However, I have a colleague who has a husband with INFP preferences, and one of his values is not how other people feel about things, and it's all about the quality of what it is he's producing. So she saw firsthand that introverted feeling and extroverted feeling are two totally different things, and he kind of lived that out and taught her how introverted feeling is different from extroverted.
I'm in a chat with Maria and Jonathan and Bradley. And,
okay.
We want to, in future, we want to go through the different kinds of FI and relate it to Enneagram. So, for example, am I right in thinking, Carol, that your best fit Enneagram style is Enneagram 2, the helper?
Yes.
Right. So Rachel is also that. And so she sees herself as, and we did an off-air hangout with her, and it was like Enneagram 2, Wing 3. And so this fits Rachel so well in the things that she's told me privately. And that's why I think this profile is so good, because it captures part of Rachel. And because she's also 2, Wing 3, I think the Enneagram Type 2 ENFPs have that bigger pull between FI and FE, because FE is strong, because the helper is very 2-ish. Extroverted feeling is very 2-ish, directing your attention towards other people, helping them. And so this bit here, do you think that's very much this bit in a square?
Oh, seriously, I think Kersey just nailed it on the head. I felt understood for the first time in my life when I read that whole chapter on ENFP. Right.
Okay. So what we're going to do there is
and that piece about losing touch with their wait, hold on. See themselves in some danger of losing touch with their real feelings. That's because you can care so much about other people and taking care of things for other people that you'll say, well, it's so important to them. I'll just go ahead and do it because it doesn't really matter to me, but it's so important to them. You actually can lose yourself by continually giving up to please the other person. It can turn you into a pleaser. And when you become a pleaser, you are in danger of losing who you are. And in my youth, I did that at times. I totally resonate with that. Now, Bradley, as INFP preferences, does that resonate with you any?
The ENFP profile?
I said about losing touch with your own sense. If you end up trying to take care of things for other people too much, you lose.
Oh.
Yeah, so that NF core can make us care too much and take on too much about taking care of other people. And then we lose our own internal FI values, connection with that, because we turn into pleasers and we give up part of ourselves, like we sacrifice it to make things okay for other people. And I was just saying, in my youth, I really did that. I had to learn to not do that. I just wondered if that had any truth for you as with INFP preferences.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I was misunderstanding what you're talking about when you said do you agree? So
okay.
But yeah, it definitely. I mean, for me personally, FI is I very much agree with the definition of it being personal values, and because they're personal and unseen by other people, you always have to decide. One thing I really like about what Dario said in his book is that you have beliefs, and then you have beliefs about your beliefs.
Yeah.
So you can believe something, but if you also believe that upholding the belief will impede doing things for people you care about, or if you have a cause which you believe in, but is you believe in what the cause is doing, you believe in the implication of the cause, but the actual cause you might not agree with. You sort of have to suspend your values if you want to, make an impact to get things done and make people happy.
And that's hard. That's hard. I don't know about you, but it's almost a visceral experience of doing something that goes against my values. It's like a feeling in my chest. It's so hard to go against one of my core values.
Yeah, well, for me, it's kind of like a delayed response to where I'm doing all of these things, and then at the moment it's fine. Then I slowly start to realize, of doing these things continually, I start to get more and more resentful, and it sometimes it takes me a while to realize, how much these values mean a lot to me, and I'm not always cognizant of exactly the implications of having really strong values have until I completely abandon them, and then things don't go well after that.
Right, so we've got a hard limit on this call because Carol's got to go half past the next hour. So this is the reason why I'm talking about all these is there's a context. There's a context, folks. So for instance, I know this is for ESFP, and yes, they've got strong FI, and we've been over this before, but it's like that's how an ESFP, and I quoted these from the Kersey ESFP profile, and because Kersey wasn't using functions, it wasn't like looking through the lens of functions. He just wrote down what he saw, because if you're writing a profile based on, say, if you're writing an ESFP profile, you might think like this: I'll put down the extroverted sense of things, I'll put down the introverted feeling things, I'll put down the extroverted thinking things, I'll put down the introverted intuition, and you'd miss out this stuff because it doesn't fit the functions. Because if you're just going on the top 4 valued functions, you'd miss out. Whereas Kersey was looking at it holistically.
Yeah.
And so my point here is that ENFP is going to do a lot of those things. So Carol, do you think you do a lot of those things in that green box? In a bit.
I please others. As a performer, I guess when I'm speaking or training, it went away.
Oh, I thought I zoomed in a bit.
There it goes. It's back. Yeah, that sounds. Yeah, I could be guilty of a good many of those things.
Right. So it's like that works together with your lead, NE. Right, and we're not going to spend a ton of time on this, but it's like, because we've covered it before. So, folks, if you look at that, this is all the stuff. And if you want to see more on this, folks, go to the second hangout where we talk about the creative function. This is about how people can be strong at their creative function. So, for instance, this one here, EXFX, so ENFP and ESFP, basically all types So it's, that includes ENFJ and ESFJ. These are all good at FE. ESFP can use FE to enact their performer role in life. ENFP can use FE to help people follow their cause, be the champion, be expressive, automatically adjust to the other person when they're speaking to them. So if the ENFP says something a little bit weird, a little bit zany, they can see that reaction on the other person and then comment on it and self-correct. Has that happened to you before, Carol, where it's like, you've had an NE moment and then you sort of self-correct and make a joke out of it? That sort of thing.
BB taught me something very impactful about this, the difference between when an ENFP uses extroverted feeling, we're very expressive and energetic about it. He said, but for someone who has extroverted feeling in their dominant or auxiliary, they have an additional filter in place that we don't have. They have a real sensitivity to how big an impact feelings can make on other people.
Yeah.
So they actually regulate FE much more. ENFPs don't regulate it well. We use it to be expressive, but someone who has a dominant or auxiliary function of FE has that extra sense of awareness of the impact and uses FE more judiciously than ENFPs. We're just kind of happy and out there with it. And I had never thought about that before. I think BB is brilliant on that.
I think I go more with Dario than Model G, which says that it's always strong. I agree with Dario where it's like it depends on the level of development, that sixth function.
Yeah.
So here's just an example, and Bradley might relate to this. The fact that an ESFJ can engage people and make them have fun by overcoming their indifference with got a little bit of oomph behind, a little bit of extroverted sensing to get people going. Right, so people can read that. We're moving on. This is how I think the function can go wrong. So I'm going to zoom in on. This is the dark side of the creative shadow. We're not concentrating on that. We're moving forward. We're being disciplined. We've got time to make up for, and this is probably more interesting. So you've looked at Dario's work. You may not have seen this before, Carol. Emotional intelligence. This is what you're all about.
Actually, I've taken his weekend workshop on this, but this looks newer than what because I studied about 3 years ago with him. That's fabulous.
Right.
Very cool.
Right, excellent. So we can. So it's almost like if you look at Dario's, it's like the new one. The functions sort of had these sort of like neurological, physical correlates.
Yeah, they do.
But it's like it's almost more interesting at a neurological level. So, for example, ISTJ having that region behind their left ear, where it's like they are more sensitive to like other people's reactions and stuff, and that would go against the theory of INTJs and ISTJs being weak at FE, but ISTJs are still facially inexpressive, but they do care about the group around them. So that's a little difference between ISTJ and INTJ. And plus also, because an ISTJ is an SJ, and 45% of people are SJs, they're going to feel less alienated than INTJ. It's like 1%.
That's true. See that upper left in region 7 about mirror neurons?
Yeah.
In the workshop I took with Dario, he said that, everybody, a lot of people can have mirror neuron activity, but he said repeatedly he found that people with ENFP preferences had higher mirror neuron activity than anybody else. It's like we're sending ourselves out there and feeling our way into it.
Look at the empathy.
Hey, Rachel.
Hey, Rachel.
Rachel, we have barely gone through, so we're trying to whip through it. We have 45 minutes left with 2 ENFPs in the hangout. ENFP preferences. Good luck to me. Right. So yeah, this is stuff that we could talk about. We could have a whole hangout just on this. So the correlates. We're gonna have to move forward a little bit because I delayed myself. Right. Okay. So this is overall.
Anyone who wants to understand this, pause the video on that performer slide.
Right, good. Yes, you can rewind it and pause it. So this is that bit about the creative function.
Very interesting.
So this is that bit I talked about the creative function before. So folks, pause that, think about it. because there's another hangout we've done on that.
Lots of great research on mirror neurons and stuff. Look it up.
Yep. And this is about what we're supposed to be talking about today, the auxiliary function, or in the model, manipulative. So Dario thinks it works at close range. And so I suppose, Carol, like when you're meeting people in a group, and it's going to be more accentuated with you and Rachel, because like you've both got that Enneagram 2 directed towards other people, and you can suppress your own needs. And it's like getting onto your territory where you listen more to your own needs is the thing. So that's part of the model. It's about where you get into, I suppose it would be self-affirmation, is if you two can get into that space where you get more towards your own sense of self, your own values, and that would be good for you. But
which
still,
functions does this correspond to? Could you clarify?
FI in ENFP resemblance.
Because there's something on this thing called that says SIFI.
Yeah.
Is that what you're referring to?
This is because Victor.
I can affirm that that's been an experience, that's something that I've experienced, that at close range. I'll just say this very quickly. SIFI, it can really be, for me, only be experienced close range.
Yes, and that does fit you, and we'll talk about that in the next hangout when we talk about SI. That's just because Victor gave the example of SEI in the PDF, and I put that in this. But just this idea that it's very strong at close range. So in particular circumstances, so naturally, Carol and Rachel, you're not going around telling everybody your values and saying you've got to do it like this, you've got to do it like that. You're with you, and it's going to be accentuated more because you're Enneagram Type 2 resemblers. So you're going to be directed towards other people, harmony with other people, and then there's a certain line though. If people cross, they go on your territory. Just whoa, whoa, whoa. so this,
I love that.
Ben, that's how it's described in the psychological type world. Is you often don't find out about the introverted feeler's values until you've stepped on one, because they're introverted, so we don't say something about them, and somebody has to cross the line before we rear up and extrovert it.
Also, I think ISFPs.
It's an interesting time to mention this because I just had a big, this is what I believe in, and tough, you don't believe in it. Well, this is what's right. I'm not changing what I think is what's right. I literally just came out of doing a big spiel on that.
That's good. And Rachel can use that word spiel very authentically.
Yeah.
She's being authentic when she uses that word. And so at close psychological distance, functions included in the bottom row are called internalities, which means they're aimed at its territory. The idea is that when they're extroverted, it gets repressed. So, for example, Carol, if you're with other people and you're doing the FE thing, it sort of represses the FI thing because you're directed towards their needs. Right, so we're going to move. This is just a random, this is a statue towards Jeff. I just think the statue looks a lot like Jeff. Now, this is the real Jeff.
Where's the statue?
That's the statue of Jeff. That's the statue of Jeff. Balzac. The statue.
Balzac, I thought that was.
I have never seen Jeff. Jeff to me is a mystery.
Well, this is
he
Jeff.
He exists beyond the realm of my.
There he is.
Oh.
Right, now he did this joke about FI, so I'll let you take that in, Carol.
FINE.
Wait, hold on.
The other day I was about to leave my apartment when the phone rang. I checked the caller ID and didn't answer it, but I wonder if God or Carl Jung was trying to tell me something. It says, better check FI. And then look at what Daniel Juhas wrote. Is your phone from 1995?
Why?
Because it looks like it's got a simple interface on it.
No, that's at least 1999. Phones from 1995 didn't have screens like that.
I'll go with that. Now, this is a very simple dichotomy, but there is some truth to it. Right, I sense it out.
And annoying. No, I'm just all of them.
I think Isabel would be very upset by that.
You're bastardized by. Now we get to the bullet points. See, I can be. Is this the right one? Yes, it is the right one. So we have both Carol and Rachel. I'm super. And because we did delay, we have both of you to talk about this. So what do you both think?
That's very genius of you, Ben, to have so many digressions. so we could delay until we had 2 ENFPs in the hangout.
Right. So Carol, what do you think?
I feel valued.
So Carol, what do you think of FI number 1? And then Rachel, you can chirp in on FI number 1.
I was reading SI.
You made it too big, Ben. Cut it off.
Oh, how about now?
Yes. Okay, this is the most, like...
Why can't I make it stay? I'm sorry, it keeps...
If you click on my square, it will stay on me.
Okay, got it.
Click on it and then it stays, yeah. Ben
no,
also
it keeps going to... Every time somebody else talks, it leaves...
Yeah, you need to click on my square, Carol.
Okay. I did. I did click on your square, dear.
Oh, well, I think what happens if you click on it again, then it unclicks.
Do the clicky thing.
So you have to wait until...
Okay.
There should be a white border around it.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, there is. There is. Got it.
Although I do tend to do a little bit of...
So yeah, this is anyway, back to the first point. This is one of the most... Ironic is the wrong word, but two other types confusing thing about ENFPs is that, I mean, if you were to say it's an actual thing, but anyway, just aside from that and semantics and all of that, is the idea that we attract attention of other people, but then when we get it, we're like, what do I do now? Leave me alone. I don't want you to be close to me. And this is like a consistent thing. So I think ENFPs are most likely to be, I mean, with me, certainly, like, really bubbly, like, when I don't know people, and then the more I know them, the more I'm like, okay, you can back off now.
And we'll be talking about that in the next hangout when we talk about SI, because we'll go over the romance style thing, where ENFPs have a romance style where they don't like being with people who are overly aggressive, who might misinterpret that thing described in number 1 as romantic.
One thing that was really important to mention is that in emergency situations, this changes. Obviously, in emergency situations, you're like, please stay as close as possible. Make sure I don't die. But yeah, that's different. I'm sure there's some kind of shift according to SOCIONICS.
Maybe. There's always a shift in SOCIONICS. So what do you think of number 1, Carol?
This is not my language. I do resonate with attracts attention of other people. Sometimes people around me will start listening when I wasn't even trying to get someone else's attention. And Rachel, do you find that even when you're not seeking to attract attention, sometimes there are people paying attention to you you weren't even trying to get to pay attention to you?
Yeah, I think that I'm quite expressive. And so as I've become older, I've been able to identify that as attracting attention, but it's not something that I seek. I don't actually like seek attention. It's just my behavior technically is expressive and therefore like results in attention.
Singing to random people in the street.
No, I sing to nowhere in the street.
Okay.
And no one watches because it's London.
To be fair, I think even I can resonate with this number 1 to where people will sort of maybe that's just because people are naturally nosy, but sometimes I'll be talking to someone, and other people will basically be eavesdropping or looking at me, and I'm not sure if that's because I'm being passionate about what I'm talking about, or maybe they just hear an English accent and wonder where it's coming from. But I mean, there could be a much of different factors. I understand in this case it's talking about like the any sort of bubbliness, but
I think you're a really warm person and people just like sense that. A slight digression, I'm sorry to slightly cut you off. One thing that I feel anxious now, I can't say. If you had something else to say, Bradley, go ahead.
I actually just finished. But I can find something to say.
Yeah.
No. I was about to say that part of this thing about stops attempts to move shorter distance can actually like one of the things that I find is I sometimes almost feel less able to be my expressive self when people get close, and I have like a bunch of theories about what could be going on about that, but that's in line with that and kind of ironic.
Yes, that's absolutely right. It's about the irony there in terms of like a perversity of fate kind of thing.
But then there's just a different subtlety of expression that happens at shorter distance, and that's something for another video.
So, Rachel, what do you think of number 2? Demonstrates disappointment and abruptly distances himself or herself from acquaintances he got tired of.
When I was younger, this was a big pattern where I'd be like, oh, you could be great. And then I'd be like, actually, you suck. But that was more just to do with people like disappointing me in terms of their trustworthiness. I also used to find people just boring after a while, but that was again immaturity and like not proper, I don't know, grasping of quite what one can gain from a friendship.
And I'll
kind of a lack of depth.
And I'll say, based on what Rachel's told me, it's not just that it's like if people have really crossed the line in terms of trust with Rachel, that she'll then push them away. It has to be pretty bad. So what do you think of number 2, Carol?
Well, I think here's where that Southern extroverted feeling training comes into play, because I would never openly demonstrate disappointment and abruptly distance. I mean, but remember, I was brought.
That's true. I wouldn't openly show either, to be fair.
Yeah, exactly.
People don't notice it. It's just like internally, I'm like, I'm disappointed, and then the abruptness is more like, I shall distance myself in a way that is socially viable, not like a you suck by. That would never happen. Just never. Just no.
Right. So, Rachel, what about number 3? Will not tolerate the situation.
1 second. Has Carol finished what she was saying? Because I interrupted.
Over to Carol.
No, I was done. I was just saying, I think my behavior got modified in what Linda Behrens would call your developed self. I think the culture I was brought up in would have kept number 2 from, like Rachel said, ever being shown outwardly.
Right.
But I'm trying to think of my childhood, because I'm trying to think of like the playground. And I think I did just like join social groups, and I never really settled properly. And this was one of the big issues, because I'd join in, I'd be included finally, I'd get to know the rules of the game, then I'd be like, actually, this is kind of boring. Why did I even feel the need to join? And then I'd leave. And then I'd try and play with someone else.
I think this sort of like plays.
I learned not to do that, because it doesn't work very well in terms of like building relationships. Like you have to be able to kind of, this is something that I really like would have benefited from being taught by my parents, who just aren't really that invested in this kind of thing, being mathematicians. That's probably the best way I can put it. Because like when I was in other families, I was taught, you have to sacrifice sometimes. You don't enjoy things, but if you want to have that strength of relationship, you sacrifice some enjoyment, and then you find they'll do stuff that you want to do later. And once I was explicitly taught that, like, my quality of experience in like friendships like skyrocketed, but I did need to be taught it, and I'm not sure whether I'm the only person who did, or whether it's to do with my preferences. But I mean, yeah. So yeah, that's.
So I wonder. I think this one. What do you think of that number 3? That one, will not tolerate the situation when her personal distance is not respected.
Is there more than 100%?
Well, there could be in different contexts.
Yeah, I thoroughly agree with that.
A star for that one.
I've got much better at using SE to create boundaries rather than feeling that they're impinged on. But yeah,
just the experience of standing up for yourself through being through bad stuff.
I don't think my skin is naturally very thick, and people being able to respect my boundaries is a key thing that I look for in friendships.
There's a concept of, now obviously at one end of the scale you can have like PTSD and stuff that happens that's really bad, that really knocks someone back. That's one end of the scale. And then the other end of the scale is what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And so the truth is in between those two poles. So there can be some situations that people have been through that toughens them up and makes them stronger people. And then there's also things that can really hold people back, and then they're stuck in the trauma that they've been through. So what do you think of number 3?
I would.
Yeah, go on.
Just in terms of the trauma thing, I would say that trauma always leaves its own emotional footprint. And you can definitely find ways to learn from it, but I'm not sure that it's necessary to have a really deep emotional footprint in order to learn from situations. I think that you can probably learn from similar situations that are less severe.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
As in, thank goodness, Rachel.
Yes.
Thank goodness that's true.
So what about that one, Cal? Without wanting to get too personal, do you relate to number 3,
Well,
Cal?
Number 3, here's my problem with number 3. I'm kind of, my mother's expression for me is that Carol is friendly as a yard dog. And she's an ISTJ, so she did not mean that as a compliment, okay?
Yeah.
I'm sort of friendly and outgoing like a border collie. So number 3 doesn't resonate for me very much because I'm just really kind of out there friendly.
Right.
And that friendliness can get let's see if Rachel has this problem. That friendliness can get misinterpreted as flirting or coming on to someone when actually I'm just being Southern friendly.
Yeah.
I'm just being nice and friendly, and I did not mean that as flirtatious in any way. I was just being friendly.
Yeah, that's what I think it is. I think this is going to relate to romance styles and like guys thinking that, oh wow, she's really hot for me. No, she's just an ENFP and it's enthusiastic about
That's
life.
right. Yeah, it's not about, you need to say to those men, it's not about you. She's just an enthusiastic person. That's great, Ben. Now, you've taught me something.
So it's like that personal distance thing. I think that happens in romances and with flirting. I think it's more about, and we'll be talking about that in the next hangout when we talk about the introverted sensing. And you did mention, Carol, that somebody suggested to you that you partner up with an SI dominant. I think they actually said an ISTJ or ISFJ.
No, not me. I taught a workshop at Otto Kroger, and there were, it was a Myers-Briggs event, so there were like 8 ENFP preference people in the room, and something like 50, like 6 of them were married to ISTJs, which just blows my circuits because I've always tended toward intuitive types. So I don't understand that, frankly.
We'll talk about that in the next hangout because the SI is related to the dual seeking. But I think it can affect it because one of your parents was that, and so it can sort of knock you for 6 rather with what you like, because it's like you already got that from your parents, so you're not really looking for any more of it. So what about
also,
number 4,
the room
Rachel?
didn't explode and there were 7 ANFPs in it. Let's just point out that that's quite impressive.
Yes, self-control, maturity.
Rachel, that's a good point, Rachel, but think about it. They were at a psychological type event, so they were all in something they absolutely loved, and it was you're right, it was a loud, boisterous room, but they were all loving it.
It's just my friend's mum is my friend. Oh no, can you still hear me? Okay, so she's just my friend now. She was my friend's mum, but I got older and we became friends. She is a Myers-Briggs expert, and she said that she once went to a Myers-Briggs event and all the types were linked up together. So there were like 15 ENFPs together in a room trying to do a project, and she just said it was ridiculous. She was like, I think she said it was like trying to herd cats. And she just
absolutely.
It was hilarious her telling the story.
Yeah,
funny.
we joke that the psychological type conferences are the largest gathering of ENFPs on the planet.
Yeah, I'm glad that they turned up. It's like I can say that about trying to get ENFPs to do hangouts. You've got to really frame it as an exciting thing. So number 4, Rachel, capable of finding a way to demonstrate her resentment or condemnation. Probably not for 2s. Yeah, probably not for 2s.
No,
I really had to let myself. No.
No, I would. No, I would keep that all internal, and I would extricate myself from the situation before I would do that.
Yeah, and so there's 2 reasons in your case, Carol.
I'm actually trying to think of any times in my life that I've been able to do this.
Yeah,
Literally, I can't.
no, that's very alien, Ben.
What about number 5? I mean, I think you both got that. Despite the free behavior, she has firm moral borderlines.
Yeah, but they can become like flexed by other people's influences, to be honest.
Yeah.
Like less firm than one might imagine.
Yeah.
I mean, the older I get, but I choose to have firm borderlines because actually I think I can have the tendency to be a little bit too relative. But don't tell anyone that, even though this is live.
Right.
Hi, guys.
Right.
Well, Ben, I'm afraid on number 5, you've kind of caught me out here. I don't like to admit about my moral borderlines, and I do think our effusive personalities it can be assumed that we're a different way about something. But oh yeah, I've got moral guidelines in there, and they are what they are, and I probably would be a little embarrassed to say how firm they are at times, but yeah, that's it.
Yeah, people like my mum, like when it does come out, like I was just having a conversation where I basically I just felt that something like needed to be dealt with. And my mum and my sister, like people in my family have said, like, you're so judgmental. And it's interesting because like a lot of people don't see that in me. But yeah, like I might not have very strong, like I might not see my morals, or like I might see my behaviors quite flexible, but my ideals, even in the most horrific of circumstances, everything can be thrown at me and I will those will remain as solid as solidity.
That's good. So this is how the FI is used in the model of the ESFP. So do you think this rings true, Carol?
No, okay, so
ESFP or ENFP?
this is a very
ESFP.
This is a very different kind of FI list, Ben. So please explain to me what's different about this list and the other list, because they're very different.
Yeah, but this is for the ESFP because.
So have we just been going through ESFP stuff?
No, we went through ENFP. I'll explain. So this is for ESFP, and the one we went through before, this is for ENFP because they've got suggestive SI. So that's ENFP.
So wait a minute. So why is all the ENFP FI stuff negative, whereas you go over to the ESFP and all the FI stuff is positive?
It's a sort of dichotomy in socionics that is a little bit theoretical, a little bit TI. It works sometimes, it doesn't work others. If the higher it up as a function, the more you can use both sides of it. It's highly technical, highly TI. We could talk about it later.
It's really cool, but let's discuss it later.
Yes, we have a time limit. So this is just, so Carol, does this ring true for ESFP? Because I just wanted to show how FI can be different in two types that are both auxiliary FI.
No, I think number 1 is true of ENFPs. 2 is definitely true.
I think I'm capable of solving people's conflicts, but I don't actually get called upon because A, people notice that I'm afraid of them, and B, I don't think people really until they get to know me are aware that I understand what's going on. But anyway, yeah, that's a personal thing.
So this might be one of these things where ENFP resembling people are going to use a lot of this stuff.
I feel like I'm capable of this, but it's not something that I'm called upon for.
Right.
Yeah, I am really struggling. I mean, I do get Barron's talks about how you can't really look at these things as totally isolate the functions, and that when something is paired with S or N, it has a big impact on it. I understand that theoretically, but this is just amazing to me that my list was so negative and this list is so positive. That's astonishing to me.
That's a little...
What do you mean by negative and positive?
Well, other list was really going on about pretty negative aspects of FI, and this list is bright and sunny aspects of FI.
Yeah.
So,
really?
What
about can flaunt offence suddenly and dramatically and flaunt tears? I don't think that's such a positive.
No,
I don't like that, and I don't like it when people do that. And I've seen people of this preference do that, and I wasn't impressed.
No, 5 isn't, Rachel, but you picked out the only one in this list that's negative. All the others look positive to me.
I mean, emphasizing your peacefulness in an explicit way. I mean, I'm sorry, I still sound quite contrarian, but emphasizing your peacefulness I also think it can be quite like annoying.
Yeah, that's showing off.
Because I know so many ESFPs that emphasize their peacefulness and then get into like fights, and you're like, dude.
Number one is it just the list starts out very positively, and the other list strikes me as very different. So I'm not really resonating here.
What I would say, Carol, is Victor is like super TI, and there's a downside to TI. It's like very, very functionally determinist. But what Maria would say is that the more strongly a function is valued, the more you can use both sides of it. So it would be that a lot of these would also apply to ENFPs as well, I would say. So do a lot of these things apply to you as well, Carol?
Number one, absolutely. So the fact that that wasn't on my list is kind of, the other list is kind of astonishing. And about called on for resolving other people's conflicts. Part of my job was to get sent into a room when people said, we can't even speak to each other anymore. I got sent into team rooms where people had stopped being able to work together. And it was very clear to people that I did not take sides and that I was incredibly fair, and I would create a safe space for them to bring things out, and I would help them get back working. Give them an emotional hug. No.
Bring all the love. It's okay, maybe not.
I was seen as very fair, so they trusted me to come in there and help. And by the way, it was also very scary. That's the scariest work I ever did. But I ended up being asked to do that.
That's one thing that I would say is different with the ESFP. I feel like on home ground in conflict situations. So I feel like they will come in and just be like, do this, you do this, I do this. And then like, oh, look, it's solved, or it's not solved and they've made it worse. But yeah, and then like, I feel like, so I just have this like, this image of ESFPs as like, because of the context of my image of them, like these things that are being listed come across with nuances that are less positive than are like explicitly said, but I can't read it because like the screen's changed. Also, my mum told me that I was funny before this, and so now I feel like pressured to be funny. So
no, you just need to be yourself, Rachel, and the funny will be natural.
So what is oneself? That is such an existential question.
Well,
but
yes,
anyway, I'm quite happy to be as I am, but thank you.
So this is just. So you know what you said there, and I think Dario got it from Linda when she talked about the tandem use of functions. So this is just an idea of like using FI in tandem with TE, because it's like you have to measure the right thing. You have to go towards it. So it's like measuring something of value, not just measuring everything and it not being relevant. Right. So
I love that, Ben. I love that Einstein quote. That's fabulous.
Right. Okay.
That's
this is
what I use on the Myers-Briggs website for the people who they call ENFPs, the campaigners.
Yeah. So this is me doing the sort of like the extremes of FI, the extreme good points of FI. Now, this in terms of plus and minus is not about charges. It just means the positive, that like FI at its best, and then FI when it's being misused. So, for instance, at its best, it gives you that gut feeling of, say, not to post that picture that looks like somebody. Like Rachel and I discussed this the other day. We had that little voice that said, don't show it, and I'm not going to show it. So, so conscience, sensitivity, empathy, good for the arts to have the FI. FI must be important because those two types that haven't got it can have problems. So I put FI polar as bad. So this is like a double negative thing. Like it's good because when you take it away, in like ENTPs and ESTPs, you can see, oh, that was a really valuable thing. Perhaps we should put that back.
It's like a social glue.
Yes.
Kind of.
And then I put determines appropriateness because determines the status of each relationship. So Carol and Rachel,
that's an interesting one.
Do you agree with those positives?
I think you mean status and... I don't know. I identify really strongly with the negatives, but like, I don't know about the positives as much.
It's like good and bad use. It's like Dario writes about a function can be well developed.
I don't think the negatives are bad uses. I'm quite pro.
Yeah. So I just sort of did that to like make it, sort of painted it in broader strokes, almost like a cartoon of FI, the extremes of it, just to make it clearer for people to understand the functions. Yeah, you can spot the typo in there. Personalize.
I'm gonna try and like list positives that I perceive of it.
Go on then.
I think it's just this ability to be able to sense and create a not necessarily visual picture, but some form of understanding of relationships and people as their own individuals, and like what brings them joy. And what on earth is going on in that photo? I'm just gonna look up. This is so distracting. Okay, I'm just gonna cover it. And like what?
This is Catherine Tim.
Yeah, like understanding. I guess a thing. I don't know whether this is exactly FI, but I kind of put it down to understanding. Like, okay, firstly, like what other people love, and like that just being a really big motivator. But also like I guess as a definition, it's like survival. It's like that attachment survival stuff. Like, it's like we are interdependent and we depend on other people to survive. And we have evolved to be that way. And there's an instinct to protect and see our loved ones. I mean, obviously there's FE that plays into this, and I might be just misunderstanding. But are people supposed to be concentrating on everything at once, like what I'm saying, and loads of stuff about Donald Trump?
Yeah, it's because we're short on time. I'm showing the slides while you're talking, so it's
okay.
like...
I just won't say anything because they're like too complicated. But I just think that
Yeah, why are we looking at Donald Trump?
It's basically I'm just
Donald Trump doesn't need to be mentioned.
It's because
Ben wants to mention that NFPs don't like Donald Trump. That's why he always brings that up when we're talking about FI.
And also the fact that ESTPs and ENTPs are weak at FI, and so we've got this Karen is probably an INFP. We don't need to test to tell us that his words and behaviours already convey. And then I said have an extra INFP point. Right, and then there's this little bit here. This is funny. This is quite interesting about introversion. I'll just put that on screen for a moment.
Oh, that's fabulous. You might have to send that to me, Ben. That's
yeah, you could use that at type conferences.
Fun things to do, things I might have fun doing with you. My idea of things to do. Oh, that's sweet. That's sweet.
And then this one here.
What's the other one? What's the one at the bottom?
That's just the lower part of the screen.
Your idea, but who does this refer to?
I think
any introverts.
But it also might be SN divide as well.
1 second, is the top different from the bottom? I'm really tired.
It's slightly different because it's like things I might have fun doing with you, and then it's things you keep inviting me to do with you.
As someone who's an introvert with both. So I'm going to say it briefly. As someone who has SE DOMs as siblings, an ESFP sister, and ESTP brother. The bottom picture of that, where it's where they're always trying to get you to do things, is very, very true. Very, very, very true.
Are you the youngest as well, or?
Now I'm the middle. So my sister's younger, my brothers older, but they both still just constantly drag me.
So if people want to know more about Bradley's family, he will talk about it in Hangout tomorrow when we review Homicide: Life on the Street. So this is Dario's book. There you go. Buy Dario's book. Oh no, it's got to come up, and then we're going to go through the test. We've got to get these done. We've got 11 minutes left. So we're going to ask Rachel and Carol. So I'll ask you, Rachel.
Carol.
I'll ask Carol first. What about that in part 1, which is going to be basic use?
Feeling strongly, absolutely. I'm kind of a toggle switch, yeah. Keeping to your conscience when making daily choice. Listening. Well, you kind of actually can't get away from it. If you've got FI going on, it's like that little inner voice, and it doesn't go away. Remain true to what you want for yourself or others. That would always be my goal. And it's actually physically painful to do something out of sync with my inner FI values. It's a visceral experience. You go ahead, Rachel.
So I would say for both of you resembling Enneagram Type 2, this is what I mean about the tension between this and then your focus on other people?
So for me, actually, like, so I've kind of chosen to be this way more. So I actually like, I have a tendency, especially with N stuff, to really complicate things. So I do feel in my gut very strongly that something is good or bad, but I've learned to trust that. But like, there are other things that obscure that, because I can actually think that things are very kind of grey, even if I feel really strongly about the good and bad. And I've just learned that I need to respect what I feel. Like, because again, as Carol says, there's that visceral thing when you don't like it. It just never ends well. Just don't do it. So I have learned as a result to keep listening to my conscience when making daily choices, and to remain true to what I want for myself and others. But I unlearned it and had to learn to go with my nature.
The one I didn't tick was this one.
Just
identify and defend what someone truly wants. What do you think that means, Carol?
I think it's about valuing, seeing what someone values. That's how I interpret that, although that's the most mysterious statement on the page. I think
really,
it's about...
I find that really clear. That's so weird.
Well, go on then, Einstein, explain it.
Then explain it to us, Rachel.
I don't know. Like, I just don't understand how someone couldn't understand. Like, you know, what someone wants. Like, you know, people are like, oh, I don't want to go to the party, and I'm not in love with that man over there. And you're like, oh, that's such a shame. Here's some grape juice, and let's just go over and stand and have a discussion about Prague next to the historian.
Now, you know something? Bradley actually leads with this function. So how about we let Bradley speak up about these?
Yeah, Bradley. Keep it short, though. We've got 8 minutes left.
Okay, just let me. How many minutes do you want me to spend talking about this? Because I can tell.
So, Bradley,
1 or 2.
do you get it too? Do you really obviously, like, really instinctively just get that identify and defend what someone truly wants?
Okay.
Like,
okay, Bradley. I'll give you 3 minutes to go through all of these.
3 minutes of all of it. Okay,
Like,
I can do that. I can do that perfectly. Defend is the one thing which has me like I don't know if they mean actively defend, or what you just sort of described at the party was like you're sort of enabling someone to you know, have a good time. So I mean that could be a form of defending, but defend is a very, very strong word to use for it's very active and almost like a championing or like actively taking an interest and actively trying to do things for others that they think they want to be doing. Is what it sounds like to me with defend.
I'll just a slight interruption here, then I'll let Bradley again. It's just that
you take this out of your time.
Right,
he is not being responsible for this.
What I'm saying is that other functions come into play. So, for instance, INFP, the SE break, and sort of not as combative maybe as other FI values. So ISFP might, you know,
it's actually a good
EIEs.
point.
Imagine EIEs with the FI. They're like, you want this and I shall make it happen.
Carol, that's ENFJ. EIE. Extrovert, no, ethical, intuitive, extrovert.
Okay.
So
Bradley, how about part 1? How do those things resonate with you for part 1?
Part 1 is the one thing that makes completely 100% like obviously tick all 3.
Right.
The only thing is that feeling the first one, feeling strong that something is good or bad, in my experience, is very much nuanced. Like, and everything's relative, so it's not so much good or bad. It's more like better or worse. So it's not like something is good and that's that. It's you know, how good is it? Do I think it's better than this other thing? I know it's bad, but is it so bad that, you know, I should just not do it? So it is slightly more nuanced than just good or bad. But in terms of like remaining true to what you want yourself and right, and listening to your conscience for making daily choices, those things are just automatics. Like I'm always checking it with myself. It's like, do I want to do this? Do you think this is worth doing? One person said this. Do I agree with it? That sort of like daily, hourly, basically.
So, Bradley, what about that second one in part 2? And then if you go through the rest in part 3, where it's more sophisticated use of FI.
Right. So I'll try and speed it along here. Part 2, I think defending what someone truly wants. You have made a really good point about ISFPs and maybe ESFPs as well. They're more likely to actually take action because SE is a very action-oriented function, so they're more likely to actually be defending people. Continue to evaluate what's worth believing in and what's important to you personally. Absolutely, that's when people are constantly contradicting what you believe and constantly going against what you believe, you're constantly having to assess, well, I think I have this opinion and no one else has it, so how much do I believe in it really? Am I willing to go against the grain with all these people having an opinion and having a very different one? Should I reconsider the opinion? Should I state my opinion in direct opposition to them? Should I hold my opinion to myself and just go along with it on my own time? All of these are constantly, to me, it's just an FI thing, I think, to where since what you believe is so different than others, you have to constantly assess, what's worth believing in and what you have to actively stand by. Part 3, remain in touch with what you want or motivates you and what's good. That's probably the hardest one on the list because you can't always do what you believe all the time. Because FI, you don't know, other people don't know what you believe until, as Carol says, you trigger the value. Or you show them what you believe, so just keep it to yourself because FI is like very internal, so no one's going to see it unless you do something to show that that's what you believe. So I don't think you can always remain in touch with what you want, but you're always cognizant of what you want, and you're mostly cognizant of when you're going against what you want as well. And that goes with like motivations and seeing if something's good or not. Create space within yourself for the truth of conflicting beliefs. I don't think there's enough time to go into that, but basically, Ben has this thing with Enneagram Type 9s having no FI.
Well, it's just really suppressed, in my opinion.
Yes, but I think this second line, I think, I know what you're saying, it's very suppressed, but this second line, create space within yourself, is very, very E9. I think the E9 is just doing this a lot to where they have beliefs, but they also value harmony in other people's beliefs. So they create a lot of space within themselves for lots of conflict. And that's very, very E9.
I'll just say about Enneagram 9, folks, it depends on which book you read. Depends on the author. It depends on, because Enneagram is quite subjective and it's the author's interpretation of it. So it's just the one I read off the Enneagram and NLP, the way it was described. And it may have been described that way in order to have something to write about what NLP techniques to use with this person. So there might have
You're
been
obviously describing the definition of Enneagram, not how people experience Enneagram. Like,
we can talk about that in future.
As in, it's quite dehumanizing to be like, it depends on the book. Because this is something to do with like human existence and experience, which is obviously
I know, but
the thing about books is that all the books are descriptions of people. So depending on what description you use, you can get different conclusions about what consists of a type and what consists of a function.
I actually think that's
Ben might have just done an INTP though.
Yeah, but
like,
what it does
maybe I've misunderstood.
Is because they're all different. It actually puts them at a distance, and you can actually get a perspective of it because you see it as a theory, and you don't get logocentric about it and believe it's 100% true, because it's like you then see it for what it is in terms of, well, this is a subjective thing.
And the summary and like all the temporaries will have their deficiencies.
So, Andy, do you do that bottom one? Continually weigh whether choices harmonise with important beliefs.
I mean, to me, that's very much
like checking in with yourself, kind of.
Exactly, but
that you mentioned earlier.
Well, for me, because I'm very much I'm in my head a lot. So if I'm acting on something, then I've already sort of made the choice that is important. So I think that's might be an ISTJ thing to where I'm talking about action-oriented values.
Right,
this is what you call for me listening to this very, very briefly, is I have a friend who is a poet and who is really interesting, but I don't know many people, and it's just I just realised that he's an INFP, and I kind of knew that, but I wasn't sure, and I was like, oh, this makes sense now. So
right,
yeah.
So this is just, so this is what somebody's written comparing introverted feeling between Socionica and Western typology, because I don't want to say just MBTI, because there's Behrens in there. She needs to be respected, and Kersey needs to be respected, and Dario needs to be respected, and they aren't MBTI. It's American school typology.
Well said, Ben. Well said.
Right. So that's that. Carol's got to go soon. So people can.
This looks like Greek to me. Like this is lots of words, and it looks like maybe it makes some kind of sense, but to me, I'm like Greek, fake, true. Filter, standing up for, truth, significance. I don't know. Like, maybe this is confusing for me.
It's like an NTP trying to describe FI. Is that what it's like, Rachel?
Maybe. I just don't understand.
Right.
Actually, this makes sense to me.
Right. Okay. Well,
may not always articulate those values. It's because there's too many of them, and you can't be constantly saying what you believe. Otherwise, you never have anything else to say.
I think that statement should say very seldom articulates all their values.
Yes. And then we've got this next.
But yeah, I was once in like a group social situation where we attempted to verbalize everything we thought and felt. And like it became very clear very quickly that this is not a viable way to behave.
Yeah, especially if you might have people with different beliefs. So maybe the person
just hilarious.
Was
like it works like a comedy sketch. If anyone has seen like the ones where they mock family situations and like they were like, if everyone was honest, and they're like, and I'm going to cover up my insecurities by making a toast, kind of thing. Yeah.
So
when you get emotionally aware people like verbalizing their feelings, it's hilarious.
Yep. I think an ENTP might think, oh, I know what would be funny. Let's set up this situation where people are, especially if they know people have different political beliefs, it's like, okay, let's take this in. Right.
I know certain individuals who've done that.
Ooh. Right, so internal social interpersonal values and functions. Yeah, so it's a little bit different. So that's from Dario's book. This is how he defines the functions. Because basically, you've got a TJ writing a book for TJs. So, so it's like gaining leverage using a framework. That's not the intent of Victor and I. It's just we use TI because we find it fun.
Well, Linda Behrens would say that you're model builders in your head, and everything is judged against the model, and you don't function without models. So you just naturally build models.
And that's the problem.
I don't get it, because like I function on models much more than I function on the FI thing. Like,
I think that's the NE. I just think that's the way the NE works. But it's like a special case in the ENFP because NE is very trans-contextual.
Because I need models, otherwise, like, I have too many nuances to make decisions, and I just end up like, kind of like, you know, when like kind of doing this, and then not really moving.
So in that case, though, you're taking the same action, but for a different reason. You're taking a model not because you necessarily believe in it, but because it's useful. And so you're using a model for a TE reason rather than a TI reason. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm using it for a TE reason to represent what my FI would be doing if my FI didn't overcomplicate everything.
And that's just Dario. I coloured it up. It's if you buy the book, folks, you will see how accurate my colour code is.
Good for you.
And good for Dario, I hope. Right. Right, that's a little bit of extra stuff.
You'd think that you like wrote this and you're like some kind of self-promoting thing.
No, I just promote other people more. Right.
Oh,
what we got FI. Now Victor can be a little bit functionally deterministic, shall we say. So it's like all the FI minus people are like horrible and all the FI plus people are, but it's not like that though, because it's like higher it is, you use different sides. So for example, INTJ
that I'm looking at giving people the benefit of the doubt. My mother says I do that to a fault. She just says I am way too making space for giving people the benefit of the doubt. Ben and Rachel, do y'all do that? I'm sorry. I meant to say Bradley. I'm sorry, Bradley. I was looking at Bradley.
Yeah, go on, Bradley.
Rachel can say something if you're already. Go ahead, Rachel.
Okay, well, I'm kind of both. Like I naturally give people the doubt, the extent to I've learned the fact that I shouldn't, and therefore, like, I simultaneously scan for everything that could be wrong with them.
We get burned. I mean, I
Okay.
think that's our natural setting, and then we get burned and we learn how to do it. But that's my natural setting. Is that Bradley?
I had to be
I got a big
burned,
smile
like,
from
really
Bradley on
bad.
that.
I had to be burned really bad in order to do the whole, like, oh, maybe I shouldn't give people the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, I think
I have to try really hard to go against that natural preference.
Yeah.
Especially, I've sort of learned my lesson over the years, but when I was really young, I was definitely very trusting of people.
Yeah.
And it does get abused by various people. I say it gets abused by basically everyone, because it's basically up to us to tell them that they're being abusive also. But since we never do it,
yeah, because they don't even realize it. They don't realize what they're doing, and you're like, oh, how can they not know that? Like, how can they not know? But they don't realize. They're like, oh, I'm just doing the thing.
I did an exercise with Bradley, and now the people out there who have friends who know about typology, it's a really fun exercise to get Dario's book and to give his descriptions of the type and see if the other person can guess it. Because I did that exercise with Bradley, and it was a very fun hour when we went through it.
Not for me. Because
you got the first 6 right though, and he kept on saying, "Is that an INFP? No, is that an INFP?"
Yeah, I think the INFJ and the ISFJ sound very INFP-ish to me. So, but I'm sorry, we can.
This was good about the what Dario found from the brain research about FI, about how Jeff, when he said that hard to embarrass, Jeff said they get embarrassed in different ways.
Yeah.
It's different things. So I think they might feel embarrassed if the field have not lived up to one of their personal standards, or maybe if somebody's pointed out some hypocrisy in their behavior, might think, oh yeah, you're right, that's terrible.
I really, really resonate with this description of FI.
I'm resonating with that, the whole thing, and also the attentive and curious for what is not said. But I'm wondering if that really comes from my extroverted intuition is inferring instead of from my FI. I wonder if that's a bleed over from NE.
Well, combos, isn't it? Functional combos.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I would say. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Bradley. Go ahead.
Well, I will say briefly that the word spectrum sort of goes along with what I was saying on the other list about feel strong that something's good or bad. I said it was more like a scale or a spectrum, and most descriptions don't list it, and this one does, so that's really, really good.
Bradley, that's well said, because good and bad seem too black and white to me. And if there's one thing, NF does not do very well is black and white. So, well, good point. Guys,
to be fair, it does depend. I think in some issues it can be very, good is good, bad is bad.
For example, early on, you said, yes, I do have a strong feeling about good and bad and conscience and stuff. So it can be very strong, but it's like the image is, oh no, all relativistic. Let's be together. Because the interaction style is accommodating.
It's very much sometimes and not all the time. Some descriptions make it seem like all it is just good, bad, evil.
Yeah,
like an extreme E1. I mean, it's not a case that all INFP is like an extreme resemblance or like an Enneagram 1 resembler where it's like hardcore on their ethics.
Exactly. Because
they do have that accommodating, consensual interaction style of mediating between people.
Yeah.
I don't know about word choice. Maybe I do, but voice tone. Guys, I cannot ignore what I'm picking up about voice tone. Are you like that? It's like, it says...
Very, very strongly. Have
I
disagreements with people who are other types about how important it is to me.
Yeah.
I'm like, I just can't speak to you if you speak that way. Like,
yeah, I can't ignore it. It's impossible to ignore it. So I said I'll choose to attend to it. It's that I can't not attend to it.
Dario said that STJs are very sensitive to that as well, because it's like they also want that thing about respect in the tone of voice, or a disrespectful tone of voice. The STJ, that's going to set them off.
Yeah. Guys, I made a commitment, so I have to go, but y'all continue to have fun. And Bradley, Rachel, good to see you again. Ben, thank you for setting this up.
That's okay. Okay, we'll go through the remainder of the slides. We've got a few random slides left. What's this? Oh yeah, this is just Victor's quick definitions of the functions. What in terms of like what they look like from the outside. So, let's get both of yours opinion.
Is Carol coming back?
No, she really has got a commitment, and we don't want to end up being an excuse.
But she hasn't.
She didn't hang up the call. She didn't
hang up the call. That's quite funny. She's an empty chair. Now that used to be an insult, but no, it's just literally she's not an empty chair. She's a full person. Right. So
that's so funny.
Right.
That's
such an
it's not as creative as what I think. It's not as creative as what it appears, because that is an expression, an empty chair, I believe. Right. So what do you think about these definitions, Badly and Rachel? What about number 1?
I can't read them.
Okay, power sensing, F. Maria and I tried
power sensing.
Yeah, that's what Victor calls it.
Is that like? Okay.
But basically, there's a civil war in Ukraine, loads of corruption, neo-Nazis. There's a lot of power stuff going on. And so there literally are neo-Nazis in Ukraine. It's a long history of stuff. So there's a lot of extroverted sensing going on. And so Victor associates extroverted sensing with, and also is biased as well. So, the way I talk about it, I'm like, oh, scary, extroverted sensing. And Dario's all like, oh, lovely. Extroverted sensing, and then now in Dario's...
all the Russians love it. They're like, yeah, it's great. Wow, we're live, wonderful. But all the Russian socionics people, there's a specific person who I'm generalizing this for.
Oh, yes.
We were discussing extroverted sensing, and she's an IEI, and she was like, I can totally grit my teeth through anything. And I'm like, no, not human nature, not how humans work. She was like, yes, SE is amazing. And I was like, oh...
Yeah, the people who tend to be suggestive for extroverted sensing always talk about how great it is, but don't actually necessarily walk the walk.
Right. I don't know, she was pretty aggressive.
Well, I suppose that's walking the walk.
Yeah, you're right. It's different, because I was equally verbally expressive. I was quite like, it wasn't that's not necessarily like, because I asked her whether her verbal expressiveness could be considered SE, and she's like, well, not necessarily.
Sorry, is there any way you can hang Carol up or kick her at the call? Because I don't. She's in the background.
Oh, okay. Well, I will just click on my square and okay. I'm gonna. Thanks for that, Bradley. I can eject her for the hangout, but I don't want to ban her.
You could unban her later. It might be like Facebook where you can block and unblock people.
Yeah, I've ejected her. So thanks for that, Bradley.
Oh yeah. Right. She should have been doing something that she wouldn't have wanted.
Yes. We don't. Yes. Yeah. I won't go into the possibilities.
See, that's Bradley's defending people's interests.
That's quite right. That's a good example. Now I know what he means. Right. So here's the bit. So this is Dario's definition of extroverted sensing, and he says that this
Meanwhile, I was too curious about what was going on to be like, I was like, oh, what's she doing in her kitchen? How interesting.
Okay. Yeah, hold that thought. Right, because I've got something to show you. Right. Catherine. Because I've got something to show you about Dario, how Dario defines SE. And this actually shows you that there is some congruency between that and MBTI. There we go. Copy, paste, and then it should go into the folder. Oh, wait a minute. That one I can close. That one I can go there. So
I like this definition of external thinking, because all the T stuff before, I was like, I don't have that. But when it shows a function that shows active, obstinate, and enduring behavior, it's like, yes, that is me.
So here, Dario has written in this book, buy it folks, that this is the highest form of extroverted sensing. And this is the bit that sounds like power sensing. Spur action and get results.
I made a deal with my mother to leave. I forgot about it.
Okay, that's fair enough. Prior commitments.
Be here for 2 more minutes.
Okay, so this spur action and get results simply by intimidating people. Oh, sorry, making your presence felt.
That's some SE break talking right there.
But here's the
That's
example.
interesting, because I think I do that without realizing it.
Dario's definition of extroverted sensing is so nuanced that it's not just reduced to power.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Which is
so
true, and Jeff
I
agrees with that
feel
too.
like this definition of SE makes me think that my SE is quite strong. Like,
Yeah, it is.
like my SE is borderline. Okay, I know I'm supposed to be an ENFP, but my SE is borderline stronger than my FI. Like, according to this definition, like.
Yeah, and also in model.
Really.
And also, remember I talked before about the role function can be very strong, and it's the same as your overall temperament. And you are very EP, Rachel. You're very N.
I've got to say that, like, I think this is probably like stuff with FI. Like, I've really had to work on, but this stuff is like. But to be fair, like, I've been in a lot of environments where I've had to really use SE. But like, no, this is like a lot of the stuff that I talk about in terms of gut instinct and physical impulses that you could be like, oh well, that's FI. Like, I would say is more linked to SE, and to do with like being in sync with physically things around me, like in terms of movement through space. Like, this can be dance, this can be like martial arts, and then immediate advantage for action. Like, if I'm running around a park, I will find the way to move around it. But it can be like, again, it can be in a fight situation, it can be a dance situation, it can be in a sports situation. I'm really hoping that my mum doesn't come in, because this is something really interesting to me. Like, really being in the moment, like in a garden, for example, and seeing and touching and smelling and just like being absorbed in that is something I can really identify with. Like the thrill of action. So like, I don't know, like you want to cross a road and like there's a gap in the traffic and there's a gap, like, you know, it's big enough, but you take that and you move and you measure the way you move your limbs, and you feel the wind against your skin, and like it's very present, and there's a split second and you notice that time, and so, or you enter a room and you just know that you need a result, and like this isn't something I'm proud of, but like just like you notice people noticing you, you can feel, this is FI and SE, but you can feel like you can feel the effect of your presence, and like how you want to measure your presence, and whether you want that to be soft, whether you want that to be harsh, what you want to do with that, and how it's interacting with what's going on, and what actions are going to be taken and arise out of that. That's very, and like I definitely can come into a room, and I think, okay, you can say it's through intimidation, and I can have a really clear intention. And it can, like, people can be like, yes, we are doing this, we are going to move, we are going to achieve this thing. And, like, that can be, that's often very physical. So, like, you could say it's intimidation, and some people who are a lot less SE strong have really said, like, I feel intimidated by this. And, like, that's obviously not my intention. But, like, yeah. Some people are like, oh, I'll follow the enthusiasm, I will follow that strength of leadership. And some people are like, I feel intimidated by you, don't behave that way around me.
I'll just slightly break in here, but what I think is, though, Rachel, is because you've got a lot of charisma and because you've got the FE there, that you're not sort of doing it in a super aggressive way like an ESTP, that it's like you have the enthusiasm. So it's like the champion.
But it's very powerful, and so it can scare some people. It has that SE element to it, and it can.
Hold on, and ESTPs aren't super aggressive all the time. But
I think one thing that ESTP is really great at is measuring when to be like the especially into and how to think. So I don't know, like I'm not sure this necessarily changes my typing or whatever, but like I've never really investigated this, and this is something that I really experience very strongly. And like on top of that, like I'm really into sport. I'm really like I'm really like the whole.
It's EP stuff.
I'm very athletic.
I mean, all EPs are going to be good at this, especially. And I also think
I know, but like I have this kind of richness of experience. Like I have this. I don't know. I think this is a like me thing. Like there is stuff about this that I describe and experience and do. And like I've noticed people look at me and be like, I'm scared of you. You have capability. And it's not even something that I value. So it's not something that like, but I've seen people as I walk into a room being like, she's a threat. And it's the people who are searching for threats and understand how fighting works, because I haven't fought that much, but well, I haven't really fought that much, and I certainly don't seek fights. But yeah, it's a thing, and it's not something that I knew about.
And Rachel, how can I put this? You are a petite person, yet you still have this effect on people.
I'm hella strong though. Like I'm built like.
Yeah,
like. I don't know. Should we?
Yeah, it is presence.
Should I bare my guns? But like, no, I've always stood very strong. Like, I mean, it can be to do with that, but it's also to do with your agility and your like muscle to like body mass kind of ratio. So like, I'm small, but that doesn't make me unintimidating necessarily. I mean, obviously to massive grown men, I'm not, which is one of the things I like about being around large people, is they're like not necessarily scared by some of the things I do, because it gives me more freedom.
So the thing is, to people who don't know functions, they might not be able to tell the difference at first glance between heavy NE use and any SE use. They just see the energy coming off the person. And so at first glance, they might see it as aggression.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, there are a lot more SPs than MPs, so they could just assume that NE is SE. But of course,
that's something that really consistently happens. I can see with what Bradley was saying, which is that people see me, and a lot of people assume that I'm an SP, and it takes them a long time to be like, oh, she can be. I mean, not that SPs can't be trusted, but they're like to really see like I guess, I mean, this is quite like up myself, but like that I have a good heart, like, and they have good hearts too, don't get me wrong, but like that I'm not going to attack, that I'm not going to want to fight. Like, it really surprises people who are looking for people who are capable of fighting, that they see someone so capable of fighting that doesn't want to fight. I think that's probably how I'd describe it.
And it goes back to Jeff's line, ENFP.
And it affects the way they treat me, because once they realise that, they then come to treat me the way I want to be treated, because I'm not involved in those games. And when I say games, that doesn't mean that they're not high stakes or serious. It just means that I'm not involved in that kind of paradigm of behaviour.
Right, so I'll do that line in case no one's heard it, and it's a good line.
Unless I have to be.
So Jeff has said, Jeff Miller, ENFPs are just like ESFPs, except ENFPs believe in stuff. And that is the key difference between the two. They can act pretty much the same.
Yeah, like if I didn't have my values, like, definitely would have punched a lot of people by now. Hands down. Might be in jail. Like, well, no, it's true. And now it's on live. Can you take that out, possibly?
No, people know that was a joke. They know that was subjunctive mode, because you know you're not an SP. It's subjunctive. It's okay. Right then.
Oh yeah,
so
this
that's
is
fine.
live.
Yes, we're live. But anyone who gets up to this point, well done. Anyone who's watched up to this point. Yeah, so this is how. So you relate to a lot of this, and I think a lot of EPs are going to relate to this.
I definitely, actually, that's one thing I was describing, because I was describing last night with you the spectrum of ENFPs, and I think it really is the spectrum of aggression, because you get ENFPs that are very soft, that are very floaty, and that lack really strongly developed TE or SE. And then you get ENFPs, I mean, maybe I'm wrong, like me, that are quite heavy on the TE and the SE. And like people like me can come across as maybe snarky, or whatever. Whereas like I can see that there are definitely some ENFPs that I know that are like very much not like that at all. They're much more kind in the way they come across. That doesn't mean that they're don't have the same fundamental like motivations, but there's a really big spectrum that I've seen anyway.
So Rachel, how do you relate to this? Now this is for artisans. Now what I would say,
to say. Not Ben. Did Bradley have something to say?
No.
He moved as if he did. Oh, okay.
Oh, no, I was just agreeing with you.
Oh, okay.
Now, I've got ADHD. Rachel may have it. I don't know if she said she's had it or not. I think I've got it. And it might just be that a lot of people with ADHD, they can have some qualities of like SPs in terms of external behaviour.
I think I've just always been very strong on the sensing thing. So I think that like it's not just that.
So David Kersey Sr., because they used to drug people up in the 60s, he went a little bit too far in saying that he didn't believe in any drugs. for people with, say, ADHD, because he saw that artisans were being drugged up at school to make them behave.
Who are the artisans?
SPs. It's just Kersey's term for the for SPs. He calls them the artisan temperament.
Interesting.
So, improvisers. So I mean, what do you think?
What is an artisan?
Wait, somebody
like outside of the context of socionics.
It's a skillful builder, I think. Like people would be like,
what I thought.
So you can have like a painter.
That's really interesting because it has the whole spectrum from like people who are making quite delicate metal-y things, but like in a quite kind of way, to people who are like throwing bricks into a pile to make a pile of bricks.
The only problem with it though is Carol said that when Linda was giving talks in like a business situation and there's like SPs who are part in the business world, and if you say that they're artisans, it's like, what do you mean? I'm a professional business person. How dare you?
Oh, really? That's interesting that someone wouldn't want to be an artisan. I thought they'd just be like, I'm not an artisan, I'm a wolf.
Yeah, they might say that if they're an ESTP. But yeah, I mean, do you get these things? Like, because a lot of this is like, I mean, because when Maria looks at the artisan chapter, she's like, a lot of this is just...
No, I have to consciously make a mental shift to decide that the next action is a free variable. I have to choose to be present and to really notice what's going on, to notice the number of, be open. It's not like I'm not open to the possibilities that those things would happen, but it's like, I won't allow it to be a free variable unless I kind of shut down all my any stuff, because it's like I'm too busy ideasing unless I'm present to be like to let things happen differently than, because if I'm busy ideasing then I kind of want things to go along in a pretty like normal pattern in the real world so that I can ideas. If I'm doing my thinky thing, then I don't want like the world around me to need my focus, because if the world around me needs my focus then I can't do my thinky thing. So I have to turn off my thinky thing if I want to let the world around me change. Because otherwise I'm going to try and keep it constant so that I can only change, so that like, you know, brain.
I think we talked about this before off air. Where do you think though you can do your extroverted thinky thing though if you focus on something out in the external world? Or do you think you need your NE in combo with your TE?
Yeah, so a tiny incy bit. So you use NE for a tiny incy bit of a second. This was months ago that we did this actually. So you go, oh look, what's going on around me? Possibility, practical step. Take practical step. Ooh, possibility. Ignore all the complicated, exciting, complicated, thoughtsy things. No complicated, thoughtsy thing. Okay, ignore that. Yeah, actiony thing.
So what about this one? Yearning for impact.
That doesn't happen to me too much. It depends. I can feel stagnated and frustrated, and then I'm like, then I really have this yearn for impact. Like, but I feel like I often yearn for impact when I don't feel emotionally seen.
Right, so what we can do is we can compare you, Rachel, to Bradley's siblings. So Bradley, how do your siblings relate to this?
Oh, but that's different. See, they don't always notice their emotional impact, so they feel like they're not impacting situations, so they have to prod people instead.
So Bradley, I think you've said that, are your siblings ESTP and ESFP?
That's right. Mm-hmm. Right,
so are those ticking those two boxes, like next action's a free variable and yearning for impact?
Definitely the first one. The next action is a free variable. That's just an ESXP way of life, I think.
So you might say to them, take your free variable away from me.
Well,
I like that. I like being around people like that. It's fun.
What, EP? Same mindset.
Yeah, possibly. But then again, free variable is such an abstract thing. And because SPs are always acting, they're always acting.
They would never say this, by the way. Like, they would never be like,
yeah, but you know the irony
variable, because if they said that, they would scoff.
You know what the irony is? I learned that phrase from Jeff. He loves that phrase. The next action is a free variable, and he's ESFP.
But Jeff is Jeff. Like, Jeff isn't representative of, you know.
And didn't it come from Kersey? Or
Yeah. I mean, that's why I've written it on there. It's from Kersey. Yeah, look, that's why I put.
If I don't stop now.
What I'm trying to Okay.
Sorry,
Well,
Rachel.
Keep going. Feel free to keep
all right.
going.
What I'm trying to say is that the only reason Jeff says it is because Kersey said it first and he read it.
Yes.
So it's not a Jeff-ism. It's
Yes,
just
quite right. But that thing that Jeff said about ENFPs, just like ESFPs, that is a Jeffism, though.
That's okay.
Right.
How many slides do we have left, guys?
We have relevant, good slides. We can make this the last one.
Okay, cool. So we can make this the last one. Awesome. Brilliant.
Yep.
Yes,
yeah, the other ones are just fluff. So what about this thing about impulsive? Because
fluff.
Fluff. Yeah, fluff. Fluff with a northern-ish accent,
Fluff.
but really it's a Midlands accent, but
fluff with an
the
O.
South, they think we're northern.
I like Midlands accents.
That's more northern there, Rachel. Maybe not.
I don't know what I was doing.
Yeah. So SPs, especially the extroverted SPs, resemblers, like to be impulsive, and they see that word as a good thing. It's them being free. So what do you think?
I definitely had this discussion. I definitely had this discussion with SPs, because I've definitely had people being like, yeah, impulsivity is good. Life is built by people who do things. And then I've had other people being like, don't you want to think a little bit harder before you destroy something? And like, I've definitely been in the room with people who have both extremes in the perspective, and I disagreed with both of them, but it was unpleasant and uncomfortable and sad to see them like disagree, but also like intellectually, theoretically could be kind of interesting within this context to describe.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very much like, I know why people can think it's bad because impulsive is always used negatively. But
I think it's a useful thing. It's a useful thing to be able to respond to situations quickly.
Exactly, and it's viewed as terrible, but it's not inherently bad. And sometimes, like, the only way to know if something like it's a good metric for knowing if something will work or not is just to do it. And
sometimes you just need to respond to what you feel or what you think, like what you feel. Basically, sometimes you just need to do the thing that looks like it is the right thing. Because how are you supposed to be able to like fine tune your own internal sense of what's like how to respond to a situation unless you actually have experiential, like that's how our systems work, that's how we learn.
Mm-hmm.
Like you don't learn to catch a ball by watching balls.
Exactly.
I remember that.
Well said.
And so
but this is the last slide. It'll be like 3 more.
It is. You said 10:30.
Okay, you're right. Okay.
Okay, so this is the tactical intelligence. So SPs are very good. Okay, Rachel, if you have to leave, Bradley, can continue a little bit?
I don't want to go, but
yeah. I don't want to cause you trouble. Yeah, bye, Rachel.
Yeah, bye.
All right, then here we go. So Bradley, we can talk a little bit because this is relevant because it's like the general EP temperament, and so I think Jeff has said. He said things like ISFPs are on loan from the NFs, and he said that ENFPs are on loan from the SPs. So it's like they have like qualities of other temperaments, and so
fair enough.
Their tactical intelligence of being able to achieve short-term objectives. That might be something that's similar with ENFP resemblers as well. So have you seen that with your siblings, where they've got a good tactical intelligence of achieving short-term objectives and flexibility of ability to improvise?
It's relative. It's definitely very, very relative. I think my sister's is good about doing this when she's around people, and my brother's good about doing it when he's around situations or basically, if it involves animate objects, my sister's better at it, and if it involves inanimate objects, my brother's really good at it. So that maybe because one's thinking preference and the other's feeling preference. And I'm not trying to say that my brother's awful at doing this with people and my sister's awful at doing this with things. But I will say that my ESTP brother tends to be really good about being able to manipulate things or sometimes not so great. Manipulating people likely are things, which can be like a TR user thing, not just an ESTP thing.
Have you got an example of how he manipulates objects?
Not that I'm comfortable sharing, because I feel I'm oversharing right now, because he has no idea that I'm totally saying
right,
this.
okay, fair enough.
All right.
Right then, so we go to the next one. That is a tactical. This is the one that Jeff. This is the quote I got from Jeff when I told him the SOCIONICS definition of extroverted sensor, and he said it can be about power, but it's always about freedom. I added the bit in the middle about coffee, ESTP cough. Right. And then it's always about like the tactical intelligence. Oh yeah, winning the moment. Do you get that attitude from like the one-upmanship from your siblings? Without going into details, you get that winning the moment.
So I might have to do a bit of thinking. Yes, definitely for my brother. For my sister, I mean, they manifest in very different ways, and I do think yeah, I mean, to be fair, they're just different people, but I will say it's generally true that they do tend to be very you know, all that matters is right now. Of course, not all the time, but they do have those moments or those periods of time where it's all about like what's right now.
If we want to be functionally deterministic, which you know I can be sometimes, so we can say here, whatever we do the hell out of it. It's like that NI focus, like when they're focused on it, but it's not very long-lived. And I think Jeff has said that he's usually into something for about 3 years. And he does the heck out of it, and then he just loses interest. Or
that's a long time for a perceptive, for a P preference person. 2 to 3 years is a long time to stick with something, I think, in my experience.
So it's like he was really into Doctor Who for 3 years. He's still into it, and he's really into baseball. But you see, what happened with baseball, and he said, and he's talked about this live, is that something's happened where a fan he got annoyed with the fans always towards, and it was just that something crossed an FI line where it's like, oh, this isn't fun anymore, because he felt he wasn't happy with the way the fans were or the way they changed the stadium. It's sort of like, oh, it just wasn't fun anymore, and then it changed. And he never knows when it's going to be.
Yeah, I mean that's true of my experience as well with you know, any is that well, I mean, I don't have to tell you about it.
Right, no.
Something's fun and new up until it isn't, and then it's just boring. And
then the obvious thing of I will not be scheduled. What I've put here for this is just some functional speculation, but individualistic. Maybe we can say they're individualistic because it's like it's extroverted thinking with a subjective feeling. Sorry, with a subjective judging function.
Exactly. So like they'll have their own references and their own terms, and they're all internally referenced. So,
and also they are the SPs in Kersey are adaptive rather than compliant or cooperative. So they will use the tool for the job whether it's approved or not, and so they go by their own judgment.
Yeah, and also paradoxically, they can be adaptively compliant as well. So sometimes the best tool for the job is compliance.
Yeah, good point there, Bradley. I'll remember that. I'll put that in the schema.
Ooh, I feel honored.
Yes, when it makes its way into the schema, and I'll probably use it as an explanation.
Mm-hmm.
And then someone might think, "Oh, that was a clever point." And I have to remind them, actually, it wasn't my point; it was Bradley's.
Ooh, I mean, you reference Jeff so often. I feel honored to also be in the spotlight.
Now, if you say it again, I'll probably remember it better. I think it's, oh, yeah, sometimes they choose to do the compliant thing because they choose to do it in the situation. Because
right.
it's
they can be adaptively compliant.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right. And ESFPs might be better at that than ESTPs. Even though functionally they don't value FE, it might be, well, I want people to have their attention on me, and I want, and I mean that in a good way, in terms of like not so much showing off as like I want the love and affection of these people around me, and if I give them the love, they'll give me the love back. So live in the now, is that very much true?
Yeah, I mean situational, of course. Yeah, I mean, this profile can, well, yes, when people are talking about SPs in general, there seems to be a lot of, like how FI is sometimes about like good and bad and black and white. SE is sometimes all about like, power sensing and, and getting stuff done right now and like not living for.
What I'm going to do is, why am I that color? Right, what's going on? It's very strange. Right, okay. Right. I don't know what... Oh, you're back. That was strange. What happened there, Bradley?
I don't know. It just kicked me out. For no reason.
Right. That was a little bit weird.
Yeah.
I think... Right, I've turned into just myself, so I'll click on you. Right, okay. So you were there. Well, yeah, we went through the extroverted sensing by Dario. Do you think that was fairer, the way Dario went through the extroverted sensing with those levels?
Yes, because it was very much about taking action, but not necessarily taking action against others or against, basically against externalities in general. So it's more about, acting just to act or acting to get a result met, or to get a need met, to get a result achieved or to get a need met. And I think that's a lot more fair than to say, it's all about power. Because I mean, Jeff was right in that it can be about power, but it definitely isn't always about power. And Victor Galenko, SOCIONICS, TI, determinism. Yeah. So.
Right. I think my computer may have overloaded. I have 4 cores. I have 16 gigabytes of RAM. It's supposed to be future-proof. Right, I only bought it 2 years ago. So we'll probably wind this up, and sure. I think this has been a pretty good hangout. I had to sort of like, at the beginning I was like, oh, I've got to sort of like put it in a framework of like the auxiliary position, the JP, and so so the first half an hour was a little bit INTP-ish. So it's like, it needs to be in the right structure, and like, I want to talk more about the creative function, and right, so we got it all in. We got the bullet points in, we got the ESFP bullet points in, and we got Dario's thing in. And we have Rachel and Carol in the hangout. So I think I'll give the hangout about 9 out of 10. What will you give it out of 10, Bradley?
Yeah, I mean, it's I wouldn't give it a solid 9. I'd say it definitely has 9 parts, but it was so erratically put together.
Yeah, okay. I'll give it about 7. Right.
I think 7's fair.
Right. So, folks, if you're up to this point,
congratulations,
typology enthusiast.
Mm-hmm.
And this video is for typological posterity. So I'm going to stop the broadcast and continue talking to Bradley.